Welcome, everybody, to another episode of What Else You Got, a podcast with Mitch and Margo. We are excited to be here with you today to discuss what we think about life, learning, and sometimes the love of logic. But, logic doesn't always make sense, so we like to poke fun at it. How are you, Mitch?
I'm doing good. How are
I'm
you?
good. You got anything interesting to talk about today?
Actually, I got a really interesting
Uh-oh.
one. So, overwhelmed. How does that make you feel?
I'm telling you, we need a spinning emotion wheel behind me. I want a spinning emotion wheel. I bet you somebody's already made one. I should just look at Amazon, but I'm not going to right now because we're talking. But I'm gonna order one. I'm gonna spin it.
There's probably also a website if we want to just use a
Well,
generic one and have
there
it
are
spin.
websites that have random name generators and random things
Hmm.
like that. We need a random emotion generator. So how does the word overwhelmed make me feel, or how does being overwhelmed make me feel?
A little bit of both. Let's start with how you feel and then go from there.
When I think about the word overwhelmed, my brain wants to switch to a different word because my brain doesn't like feeling overwhelmed. I, you know, when I think of overwhelm, I think of people who multitask. And I know a lot of people say they are great multitaskers, but multitasking is not actually a true thing because our brain can only focus on one thing at a time. So when people think they're multitasking, they're just rapidly switching back and forth between topics, back and forth, back and forth. And so you lose time switching.
Yeah, I actually saw a really cool way to demonstrate this. So, count 1 to 5,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
A to E.
A, B, C, D, E.
Alternate them.
1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, 5E.
You actually did
That's
better
because
than
I'm
the other
awesome,
person
let's
did in
be
the
clear.
video.
Most people would not be able to do that quite as effectively, but I'm pretty impressive.
Granted, yeah, you went through it really fast, but at the same time, um, I'll actually put how long it took you up on screen. But I'm pretty sure it's more than twice the time than just going ABC one two
Okay, you
three.
do it. You do it. 1 to 5, A to whatever.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A B C D E, 1A 2B 3C 4D 5E. You did it so much easier than I
Hey, I'm a
did.
competitive person. I knew there was going to be a competitive element when you asked that question, and so I just kicked into competitive mode.
I'll put the times on screen and we'll uh, see what everyone thinks about how fast we did, and we'll be interested to see how fast everyone else
Frankly,
can
I
do
would
that.
love to see that in the comments. Everybody conduct that little test, but no practicing. We didn't practice, so no practicing. Just set a timer, do it, put your comment in wherever the comment box is, and tell us how long it took you to do it. Who's fastest?
And if you really want your first time doing it, and then your best time, because there's going to be someone who's going to put their best time in. Based off of the averages, we'll see who's got the true best.
I'm just picturing all these people out there practicing that over and over again. Could you imagine you're sitting at work practicing that and your boss walks in and hears you practicing? What are you doing? Why are you not working? Or, a mom with toddlers running around. It could be an educational tool for toddlers. We could get the toddlers in on it. I want to see a toddler doing this.
That's where someone's going to remix our video.
Yes, please. See that would be a fun viral TikTok to watch. A whole bunch of people doing the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ABCDE, and then I don't really want to do it again because it might be harder the second time. But that would I'd get on board with that. I would click like on all of those videos.
Hashtag multitasking
Or anti-multitasking.
or cognitive switching.
Ooh, cognitive switching. Ooh, I like that phrase. And this was because you asked me about overwhelmed. See, I am not a good multitasker. Number one, I don't believe it's a thing. Number two, it is hard for my brain to switch between tasks rapidly. And so that's the first thing I think of when you bring up the word overwhelmed is don't make me multitask. Don't make me do it.
One of the interesting things, I didn't prepare this statistic, but at least in IT, if you interrupt a developer to ask them a question, you have cost them a half hour. So even if they were in the zone and it pulls them straight out of the zone and then they have to recalibrate and get back into it.
Exactly. And it's true of multiple industries, not just programmers, because anytime someone is focused and making progress on a project and they're interrupted and pulled away, there have been a lot of studies on this. It takes them time to then get back to where they were. What was I working on? Which tab was I in? Where was I in this? So yes, it is definitely a cost in productivity.
Now that we talked about how it makes you feel, uh, since you are the English expert of us, how would you define overwhelmed?
Okay, so I'm not typing on Google. You can see I'm not looking at the other monitor. My hands aren't on the keyboard. How would I define overwhelm? Overwhelmed is past tense. Overwhelm, I would define it as too much sensory input for a person's brain or emotional ability to manage, causing a feeling of overwhelm. I'm gonna ask Google. Or do you already have Google up? Did you already ask Google?
I pulled it up since you were talking about it. So, overwhelm, definition one, to bury or drown beneath a huge mass,
Oh,
defeat completely,
oh,
give too much of a thing to someone, something,
oh.
um, and too strong for, also overpower.
Okay, I really like that. Read the first one again.
To bury or drown beneath a huge mass.
Okay, I mean, that is so applicable to everything I just described, because then the AI overview here says to feel overwhelmed means to be so burdened, stressed, or pressured that you feel unable to cope or manage it. So, hey, I was pretty close to have so many things coming at you, your brain or emotions can't manage it all. But that first definition you read, that visual of just having so much dumped on you, that's a pretty good visual.
Now, one of the interesting things that I thought of is like an RC car. If you try pushing it, it can zip around by itself, but as soon as you put a little too much weight on it, you can hear the motor just zzz, and just slowly burning
Mm,
itself out without doing anything.
mm.
Which there's a bunch of different tricks to help manage it. One of the things that I actually came across the other day that was quite interesting, and after a little bit of research, the term that I found was counterintuitive productivity. Is how you
Ooh.
deal with overwhelmed.
Wait, that's how you deal with overwhelm?
That's one of the ways.
Counterproductive, what did you say?
Productivity. So counterintuitive productivity.
Counterintuitive productivity. Okay, what does that mean?
There's been a bunch of studies, and I actually did look up studies this morning, where some people, to become less overwhelmed, they take on more tasks
Intentionally? You're saying that's a good thing?
intentionally.
Counterintuitive.
Yes.
How does that help with the feeling of overwhelm?
Okay, think of your to do list. Those are the things that you have to do, you don't really want to do. They're there, and if the list keeps getting longer, you feel more and more overwhelmed because you can't seem to clear them off fast enough. And so, by adding things you want to do to the list, you now have things on the list that you want to do. One, you can start checking them off, but it really comes down to the way it was described is it's the ratio of the things you have to do on your list to the things that you want to do on your list. And if the ratio is too heavy on things have to do and not so much you want to do, then you start getting overwhelmed. As you add in things that you want to do, the ratio shifts and your overwhelmed reduces.
Does this also apply to people who have a written to-do list, but then go to the to-do list and write down things they've already done just so that they can cross them off?
I think it fits in the same family of you're offloading the pending to dos that you don't want to do with either tasks completed or tasks that you want to do. Which the one risk to this is procrastination, but there's also a ton of cool stuff with procrastination. But it really comes down to playing mental tricks with yourself to make the list less intimidating, where you actually want to build on it and grow.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you're just playing a game, playing a game, trying to trick yourself into doing stuff. But if you're making up stuff just to make yourself feel like you're getting stuff done, are you actually getting anything done?
So there's productive procrastination,
Productive,
which
wait, whoa,
there
whoa,
is
whoa.
the
productive procrastination?
Yes, it's actually a term, which basically comes down to you have a task that you need to do, but you'll go do something else that's productive instead to say you're productive when you haven't accomplished what you need to do because you're procrastinating it by replacing it with something else that is less of a priority.
Productive procrastination. You're coming up with a lot of really cool terms. I might need you to write these down for me.
And it's just one of those really interesting parts where once you get into doing work, you can keep that momentum. So if you need a task to get yourself started, find a task that you like doing in the mornings to get yourself into it, to start working on it. Because if you hate accounting but you like math games, what do you think you should do? Probably sit down, do a reasonable amount of math games to jump in, or you like calculating the size of how much material you need and volume wise, calculate that, then do your accounting. You already have the math in your head, and so it's you're still doing something productive, but you're able to then shift over and do a similar task, and you already have the momentum of thinking in
It's
numbers.
interesting how differently your brain works and my brain works because many years ago, I used to offer individual coaching on productivity. And one of the things I would suggest to people was to set a timer. If you're new to the concept, set a timer for 15 minutes because the fact of the matter is, we all can do pretty much anything for 15 minutes. So you don't want to, if you're, I mean, I like your ideas of productive procrastination and some of these other things. For me, I'm a hurry up and get it done kind of girl. And so the
Mhm.
concept of productive procrastination is, I'm still processing. I like the idea of setting a timer. And so when I used to coach people on ways to improve their productivity, I would suggest they go set the timer. And then for 15 minutes, that's all you have to do, tackle that to do item that you've been procrastinating, that you do not want to do. And then what happens is once you actually get the ball rolling, get those wheels turning, I'm trying to think of more, tacky metaphors I can throw in there. But once you get it going, when that timer goes off at the 15-minute mark, if you're actually making progress, turn off the timer and keep working. But if it still feels torturous, then turn off the timer and switch to a different task because you can actually get of a lot of tasks accomplished when you use a timer. And then once you're comfortable with the 15-minute timer, increase it to 30 minutes because if you have things on your to-do list that you've been procrastinating, setting a timer, at least taking a chunk out of it, you will make some progress. And then you'll feel better about at least making a little bit of progress instead of just ignoring it and procrastinating it and not touching it. So I like the idea of using a timer.
And I believe that's known as the 15-minute rule, which is actually a quite common thing. I've even heard it as low as 5 minutes, but to your point, it's get in, do something, and at that point, usually you'll have the motivation to continue, or you have accomplished it, or you just realize today is not the day and you move on.
Yeah, there you go. Get it done. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, those are some pretty good tips for if you're feeling overwhelmed. First of all, Brené Brown talks about using correct words. I'm obviously doing a horrible job of paraphrasing her, but she talks about naming emotions correctly because if you can name an emotion correctly, then you can better understand the definition of that emotion and then you can better understand what it is you're going through. So, we've talked about overwhelm and the definitions of overwhelm. So, if you can identify you're feeling overwhelmed and then understand the actual definition of overwhelm, then you can, just like you talked about, then you can talk about strategies and ideas, actions to take to manage that feeling and move through it. Take action because oftentimes the step of taking an action will help move you through whatever emotion it is you're feeling.
These are only a couple of the ways to help motivate you through things and get over the overwhelmed. Sometimes task shedding is the only way to do it, where you share the burden with someone or deprioritize others. But there's so many different ways to help work through being overwhelmed and to have the motivation. And doing a small little topic shift, so a little bit more on the motivation factor. There's a bunch of different ways to motivate people, and we talked about just simple, get the task done. But did you know that if you provide too much incentive, people perform less well at a task?
You know what? I just watched an HR video yesterday on a similar topic. That's interesting. And I was planning on looking more into the topic about how if you want to incentivize employees, it's not about giving them just praise or, well, I'm trying to remember what that video was saying. Clearly I need to study it a little bit more. But if you want to create loyalty amongst a staff or employees, it involves a lot more basic concepts than I can't even remember what your question was. What was your question?
Did you know that giving too much incentive can cause counterproduction?
Tell me more about that.
So there's a couple different ways. So if you imagine someone playing a simple game, I'm trying to think of one that's a little skill based, but I'm drawing a blank on. But if you play a game, let's say, where you have to do a bunch of math equations. I know I keep bringing up math today, but apparently math's the ticket for today. So way back in the day, we had these timetable sheets where it was like 20 times table questions, and you had to go through and mark them. If you gave that to an adult, you could fill it out pretty quickly. If you offered them 10, 20, 30, $100, they would take longer to do it. Just simple multiplication, single digit. As you offer incentive, and as you and you make it a challenge, saying, "Hey, if you can do it in 10 seconds, I'll give you $100." They'll take longer because they have that challenge, and their brain is spending cycles on trying to measure how well they're doing versus just get it done. If you get it done, you'll have a better job of getting it accomplished. Now, if we shift it a little bit, and in work, if you provide a small incentive, say like a $25 Amazon gift card for hitting a number of sales, it's small, but it's a little bit more encouragement for them to do better because it's not something that is a challenge to them. It's something that is easily doable. They won't stress over it, which will because it's the stress that reduces the productivity. It'll encourage them to go faster. So finding the appropriate gauge for the reward is really where you get the best productivity. Because there's a Instagram channel that they have all these brain teaser uh, word challenges, and you're sitting there and you're screaming at the screen going, "It's this answer," but they're just flustered because they know that there's a reward. They're on camera, and so it's the flusteredness that makes it where they perform worse.
I love that concept. And I also think it actually relates back to a term you used before about task shedding. So you're talking about incentivizing people. I think that there's a couple of important things here to take note of. Number one, you want to use the most appropriate incentive for a specific individual, which means you need to know something about that individual and what best motivates that individual. So sometimes blanket incentives across an entire staff or system or whatever, sometimes those aren't always effective because you're not paying attention to the individual people. And that circles back to the concept of task shedding. Because if there are too many items on someone's to do list, and this can be personal or business or whatever, if there are too many items on that task list, it can cause overwhelm and, frankly, paralysis because there's so much you just don't even know where to begin. If you can go through and shed some of those tasks and not just throw them in the trash, but if you're thinking in terms of HR or a management position, if you understand your staff and you know who excels in one area and who excels in another, then you can task shed, but task divert and give those tasks to the people who are more skilled in that area and can pop those things off a little more quickly. And that same can be said of any organization, whether it's a family, a charity, a just a group of people, even a group of friends. If you know that Susie is more skilled at this particular task, then don't assign it to John, who hates that task and will procrastinate it for 2 weeks before even touching it. So task shedding or diverting or reassigning, knowing people's personalities, skills, and talents, and incentivizing. It all ought to be personalized.
Yeah, and I want to point something very interesting out. So you brought up task shedding and then also task diversion. It really comes down to where you're looking at it. From the individual, you're shedding the task, but the organization or the team or the group is shifting or diverting the work. And so shedding in some cases is a negative connotation. But if you zoom out one layer, it's not shedding, you're just shifting. Now, if that team can't handle it, then they can shed to the next team, or they shed it to their future selves. And so it that perspective really
I
helps.
love
Yeah.
the concept of future selves because, you know, sometimes I'm a little interesting. Sometimes I will actually take a $20 bill and I will stick it in the pot. So, like in the summertime, I'll take a $20 bill, stick it in the pocket of my winter jacket because I know that my future self will be quite delighted to stick her hand in the pocket and discover a $20 bill. And so sometimes my future self thanks my past self for doing something nice, which includes, usually I'm not good at hiding things from myself because I fixate on it. But sometimes I'll take like my favorite chocolate or something and I'll put it out of sight, out of mind in a place where, I don't normally, in a cupboard drawer or, in a pot or a pan, put my favorite chocolate there. And so then I'm having a day where my storage of chocolate has gotten low and it's been long enough that I forgot about the chocolate. And then I just happen upon the chocolate and I'm like, dude, self, thanks. Future self, grateful.
Shifting back to motivation. So we talked about how positive motivation can cause interesting effects, but did you know that negative motivation can have similar problems?
Problems or rewards? What are you talking about?
So there was a study done by Yuri Grinzy, I probably butchered the name, that in a preschool environment, that to encourage parents to pick up their kids on time, they imposed a fine. So if you show up late, you get a fine. What they actually had happen is they had more parents show up late.
Because they fixated on being late.
No, because it then became a transaction of I'll pay you extra to keep
Mhm.
my kids a little bit longer. So it's one of those that yes, it's a cost, but it may actually encourage the bad behavior because there's a joke that goes around that speeding is for the rich.
Which, frankly, is kind of true.
Yeah. First off, obey the laws and be nice to those around you. But it's one of those that if you break the law of what the speed limit is, you don't have to do any prison. There's not anything that really goes against you except if you get to pay a bill. So if you want to go fast, you get a bigger bill, which that's one of those that it's a really interesting concept around you want to discourage something by imposing a cost, but you may inadvertently encourage it by allowing people who can afford it to take the advantage of I'm running late, I've got the money, it costs me more time to sit around in traffic, so let's speed a little bit
Well,
faster.
and it's not even just a matter of being able to afford it. And, dude, this might be a whole nother topic for a whole nother episode, but there are serious differences between people who have money and people who do not. I know a person in particular who always speeds because not only does he have the money to pay the speeding tickets and the resulting increased fees for insurance, but he just has a lawyer on retainer that has whatever connections that just wipes those speeding tickets. So they're not actually even on his record. So it's not just having money, it's having connections and people with, connections with connections. So I'm not sure we have time to get into the whole topic of rich versus poor today, dude. We might have to move on. Mm.
I'll throw in one other set of motivating factors that I came across. So, one of the best, most proven ways to encourage people to uh, complete a task or to progress is the feeling of personal accomplishment or personal achievements and personal benefit out of it, which there's a couple of interesting terms of self determination, self efficacy, and there's another one for leaders where you need to dream big enough where other people's dreams can fit inside yours. And so, as people all have the same dream, or at least the same objective, they're able to move in the same direction. And because of that, you'll have that motivating factor of beliefs and perspectives and rewards that is internal, that outside forces can't really influence as
I'm
much.
telling you, the person who can be self-motivated, that is an ideal person to associate with, whether business or personal life, because there's a dynamic when it comes to a person who is self-motivated. But, you know, we're running out of time.
Well, you got anything
Oh,
else?
yes, yes, I do, but not for this episode.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in for this episode of What Else You Got with Mitch and Margo. We'll have another episode out for you here shortly next week. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, interact, all those fun little things on whichever platform. We're on all the different podcasting platforms. We're on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and feel free to go over to scabbardmedia.com where you can access even more behind the scenes and exclusive content. And once again, it's What Else You Got with Mitch and Margo.